Welcome to the Paradise Paradox. I'm out here in Santiago de Chile and see the Andes Mountains in the background. The other day I had the chance to interview Joël Valenzuela of the Dash Force news team, and he is known for being a guy who lives purely off cryptocurrency. So he wanted to get out of the fiat currency system completely, and we talk about the groundwork that he laid, like the history that he had that enabled him to see the potential of cryptocurrency when he first heard of Bitcoin and started to wrap his head around it. So we talk about the Mexican peso crisis when he was living as a child in the north of Mexico, and we also get into talking about Dash evolution and the solid foundation that's being laid for an excellent user experience in cryptocurrency, which we hope to see in coming years with the Dash Evolution wallet. So thanks so much for tuning in. Remember to check out Dash Force News so you can follow interesting news about Dash from Joel. Let's get into it. So I wanted to ask you about how you first got into cryptocurrency. Like a lot of the time, I guess we focus on the stuff that happens after we get into crypto, but I think there's a lot of like foundations that get laid before we even heard of Bitcoin or Dash or whatever. When you first heard about cryptocurrency, what were the things that stood out to you, or how did it make sense to you?
Yes, absolutely. I've always cared about freedom, the concept of human freedom, people living their life according to what they want to do, and how much happier and better that can make people. And part of that was related to sound money. And a lot of people don't really have, some people are hobbyists with gold and silver and things like that, but I grew up in Mexico in the early 90s, and there was a peso crisis, and I remember asking my parents, what's up with this coin that has many higher numbers on it, but it's just no good anymore. And then this one is good. And then I remember the exchange rate. Oh, it's like 7.5 pesos to the dollar. Oh, wait, it's 8 now. And it's like, why did that happen? And so always been doing that. And I went to Romania when they were switching from the old lei to the new lei. So they chopped off 5 zeros and there you go. It's the new one. So I always kind of knew that there was something wrong with the money and I saw firsthand there's disruption that happens with people that they work their whole life and then it just kind of goes away because of some decisions of a central bank. And so I was always into gold and silver, things like that, not because I'm really into metals, but because I cared about that kind of a thing. And so when I first heard about cryptocurrency, I was like, oh, this Bitcoin thing, I hear that's good. It's like gold, but better. All right, whatever. So I received some. I was traveling through Chicago, and a friend of mine paid for his part of the pizza with Bitcoin. He's like, here, install this app. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And it was pretty interesting at that point, but it wasn't until later 2013. First off, the price going crazy, obviously, oh, this now I can buy like a lot of pizzas with this money. But also,
so he paid you, and you paid
yes.
for the whole in cash. Is that?
Yes. So I paid for the whole thing in cash, and he paid me back. And that was what first got my attention, that, oh, this is something very interesting. This is something that's going to be very important in the future of the world. But it didn't click to me that it was huge until a few different times there was that whole thing of just going out to eat with a bunch of friends. One person just pays the tab and everyone else just pays them in Bitcoin. Just here, let me scan your phone. There you go. And that kind of that was before a lot of these payment apps got around or were popularized. And the fact you could just download an app and not do any kind of AML KYC, not have to register, not have to. And there's a bunch of different apps you could download. That were not compatible, not anything, but yet were compatible. Here you go, just send peer-to-peer cash. I knew that ease of use, that lack of friction, because money was always scary, especially when you're like a kid and you're like, you know, I mean, I was late 20s by then. I wasn't a kid anymore, but thinking back to when you're a kid, you're always like, oh, well, I got the paper money. I know how to use that. But then you're thinking about accounts and just documents and just all this kind of adulting thing. And it's so scary. And even when you become an adult and you're very familiar with that stuff, there's still always this like, money is just like, oh, you got to be careful with it kind of thing. But then here's just this free flowing. Here, I'll pay you. I'll pay you. Oh, you paid me back. Oh, I sent you $5 too much. Here, send this back. And just that freedom, that absolute financial freedom. I was thinking beyond, oh, this is cool. I was thinking the world's never going to be the same after this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have noticed that when I was in Mexico, like you go to Banco Azteca and they sell silver coins right there, the Mexican libertades. And in Australia, I remember it must have been around 2011, and I was just getting involved in precious metals. And I went into a bank and asked them for silver certificates, and they were like, I have never heard of that, like in a mocking tone.
Yeah,
so
of course.
So it's interesting how in countries that are more familiar with financial collapse, they still have those ties to silver, and everybody kind of knows that counts.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it seems like the reserve currency in a lot of the world is the dollar, and that's just sort of the biggest network effect. And it's a little bit it's kind of I think it holds up as far as that house of cards holds up. As soon as you get any kind of issue with the, what do you call it, the American hegemony, the Federal Reserve, any kind of issue with the dollar valuation, there's so much of the world that's going to go fall down because of that. And I think a lot of countries that have been doing dollar pegs and things like that have been reevaluating that. And that's the great thing about cryptocurrency is just there might be some technical barriers, but you could just start using it. Just get someone to use it and no one can stop you. And you don't have to ask for anyone's permission. You don't have to say, well, I don't know if we have this relationship with this country and they're going to have their currency. None of that. It just, we're using this now. And then you can use 5 of them if you want. Like no one cares. And that's kind of the radical freedom that really made me think this is something that's going to be very special.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. You probably saw that article from the IMF talking about how they plan to introduce negative interest rates. Do you know the one?
I might not have seen that one lately, but it does sound like a crazy idea.
Yeah. So I guess like a year ago, negative interest rates were sort of a conspiracy theory, but now they're quite open about it. And in this article, it's talking about e-dollars and old dollars. So you go into the bank and change your old dollars for e-dollars, but the old dollars lose value against the e-dollar every year. And it was interesting because it said in the article, wow, this is a 2-currency system. This is going to blow some minds. Like people will have to get used to this. And I was like, that's funny because most of the world kind of does use more than one currency, a lot of places.
For sure. I mean, even when places where, a very long time ago, I was living in France, and I remember some of these establishments still had stuff priced in francs as well as euros, even though you had to pay euros. It just because people couldn't get their minds around the new pricing system, and they just had to do that. And yeah, a lot of people do have. Growing up on the U.S.-Mexico border, within like on the border in the U.S., you could pay for things with pesos. Not every establishment, but a few of them took it. Even the Taco Bell took it, which is kind of funny. But then in the Mexican side, all the way like much further penetration into the country, you could pay with dollars for everywhere. And it's only when you start to get like 8 hours drive south or more, then it starts to be like, yeah, you kind of have to switch that over. But yeah, a lot of the world does do with like double currency. And obviously that's kind of for those of us who live off of cryptocurrency, it is a little bit of that whole idea is not that foreign to us anymore.
Yes. Yeah. So when did you make the decision to start living just in Dash or mostly in Dash?
Yeah. So it started with Bitcoin when it was, late 2013. I just thought this was cool and always prioritized anything that would pay me in that. But it wasn't until late 2015 I decided might as well do something crazy with my life. I'm going to stop accepting fiat currencies for payments. Only if people are going to pay me in crypto, I'll take it. Otherwise, I won't do the work. And
Right.
so, late 2015, I started writing for Cointelegraph and doing some other stuff that would pay me in Bitcoin. Just early 2016, closed my bank account and just don't want this anymore. And so I've kind of been that way ever since, except late 2016. I'm sure anyone who's been monitoring the Bitcoin network today and yesterday, etc., has seen the congestion has gotten crazy. That a lot of new people are pouring in trying to buy, and the fees are going through the roof. I experienced that in late 2016 before it was really bad, when it was still like, oh, now I have to pay 50 cents for a transaction. Oh, if my coffee's $1.85, this is starting to become a little bit of a problem. And then I have waited around for like an hour or two in a shopping mall waiting for a confirmation. Like, when is this going to go through? I've had to skip lunch because it wouldn't go through in time. I've had to do all that. And it just, at that point, I'm just like, this isn't just, oh, well, what do you think about the block size debate? It's just like, I can't live this. It stopped working. My livelihood is impacted. So at that point, there's a choice. Do you keep living? Do you keep living this crazy experiment? Or do you not? Do you give up? And I didn't want to give up. So I just went down the list. What's next? Like Bitcoin, scratch that off. What's next? What else can I live off of? And Ethereum was, not really being pursued as a payment method, and still isn't really.
Yeah.
So no, not that. Litecoin wasn't being actively developed on at all. It was dead, completely dead back then. That was like a few months before Charlie got it onto Coinbase and everything else went all crazy. But it was not being used. Bitcoin Cash didn't exist for another year. So the only option there was Dash. And so there was like a few months when it was a little bit rough where I'm like, oh man, there's like 5 things I can use this on. But it pretty rapidly became much more comfortable. And now it's probably easier to live off of Dash than anything else. So since about late 2016, early 2017, it's been, all Dash. And that's like 2.5 years now. And we're still working great. And that's the thing is I still remember that stress of like, oh, is this going to work? Oh, what's going to happen? And all that kind of, I can't live my normal life kind of feeling. It's not going to work. I remember all those feelings. I've never had those since. It just always worked, always been smooth, always been cheap, always been something I could recommend. And being involved in it and involved in looking at the governance, I've been very confident that it's not going to go south. And that's one thing that's, I've been always watching space, always watching, say, Bitcoin, then split to Bitcoin Cash, thinking they solved the problem. And then Bitcoin SV goes off. And there's clearly a governance issue there where you can't really rely on it being stable. And people build livelihoods, they build countries, they build businesses. The whole world gets built on stability, on being able to predict certain things. And of course, as much as we love the crazy volatility in days like, the last few days, that's been a good time. At some point, some things have to be constant in life. You have to be able to say, I'm going to wake up in the morning, my lungs are going to work, I'm going to still be breathing, I'm going to be able to feed myself, I'm going to be able to get to my place of work, and I'm going to be able to keep on making money. My vehicle is going to work. My, food supply is going to continue. My money supply, my research, it's all going to be, I can rely on some things. And I really think it's important to just be able to rely on something that you're not going to waste years of your life on something and then it just kind of goes away or stops working.
Yes. Well, Dash has been very consistent, especially with the transaction fees and the transaction times. I've never had a problem with it like I have with Bitcoin. Like I remember once with Bitcoin, I forgot, I think I was sending it from blockchain.info. I forgot to adjust the fee correctly and it waited in the queue for like 2 days and then it was reversed. And that has never happened with Dash, and I wouldn't expect that to happen with Dash.
Yeah, that happened to me. It was also blockchain.info. And I remember I was trying to send a transaction, and I paid a few dollars for a fee for a relatively small transaction, like a $50 one. in like a significant percentage, and the transactions were stuck for 2 weeks. Just it was not going through, and I couldn't resend it with a higher fee. And then one after it failed, and before rebroadcast, I tried to send it somewhere else with a higher fee, and then it just double spent. Like now I had the same funds going in several different locations and all just not going anywhere. I'm like, oh, how can I could not figure out how to get it to work. And finally I got a break and it just kind of went through somewhere. And I'm just like, I'm getting rid of this thing. Shapeshift.
Yeah. Let's go back to the currency revaluation in Mexico. Like, I guess you must have been very young when it happened, but you do remember something about it.
Yes.
Okay. Because I remember we went, I was with my buddy. We went to some coin shops in Guadalajara and we were asking the guy, so what happened? Like, what was it like in 1990? It was like, it was terrible. It was chaos. It was a desmadre. And I was like, really? So could you still buy tortillas? And he was like, yeah. So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't understand the extent. Like, it wasn't complete chaos, but it was very chaotic. So
yes, as with most things, it's during the period that's pretty terrible. I was not directly affected because that was early 90s and I was only born in the late 80s, so I wasn't very old. But just seeing things like switch hands, mostly I saw like the wreckage, so to speak, where you just see old coins that just aren't worth anything, and people didn't get rid of them, and they didn't always get substitutes. Like, for example, with the reissuance of the currency in India recently, where they took out several of the larger denominated bills, a lot of people just didn't get theirs back. They just kind of, your money's gone. And so there's always that you can see that wreckage in the background. And so, I mean, I have several friends, in fact, actually an employee in Venezuela, and it's been pretty rough. That's kind of like the horror movie version of Mexico. Like, Mexico just, oh, okay, well, this happened, it sucks. But now you got to like Venezuela, and it's like, whoo! Like, of course, I always keep the Bolivar note by my desk just to remind me of like, oh, it's 500 Bolivars, which is worth like less than a Satoshi. Like, it's or if nothing at all. And this used to be able to do something with this, and it just completely not worth it. And then more than that, it's not just, all right, well, then I guess I got to spend it right away. Then you have, well, okay, bales of cash are just not going to work. You cannot write enough zeros on those notes. And why even make cash if it just becomes useless within a week? And then, okay, now we have banking systems, and then the power outages, and it all doesn't work. And then it's just like, well, now what do we do? And just like that ultimate failure of systems, of centralized systems, is like a stark reminder that this whole, oh, it's here today kind of attitude is not always going to work. It could be here, gone tomorrow.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there's always that normalcy bias. That's kind of the reason I liked living in Mexico, because I always thought, if I'm in Australia and something really goes down, people are just going to freak out. They're going to go into denial because they've never really seen hard times. But in Mexico, people understand things a bit more.
Yeah, that's a little, that's also kind of sad if you think about it, because when you're living somewhere, if you think people should not be conditioned, I mean, life is struggle, of course, but people should not be conditioned to catastrophe. People should, I believe in working towards a world where we all can feel safe, happy, fulfilled, and prosperous. And this is not a situation we should be trying to deal with where it's like, oh, we start to stress out over this. Or for example, I'm just getting to the age spot where I can start to remember prices as a child, and in the gold standard of fake money, the US dollar. And it's completely, even at the top, it's just like, for example, I remember spending like $5-6 on a movie ticket. Now it's like easily like double that. And that's just in my short lifetime from like somewhere in the mid 90s, mid to late 90s to today. Just, all of a sudden it's just worth so much. I remember getting yelled at by my parents if I ever ordered anything on the menu that was like in the $8 or $9 range. And it's like, now you can't, like, now you go to like the cheap, the fast food restaurants even, and it's like there or more. And I just, like, the adjusting the thinking to that is already, people just adapt. But think about my the first time I got paid entirely in Dash was I was writing a few articles, and I think it was like 3 Dash an article or something. It was at $7 per Dash. And so, I mean, obviously that looks really good today.
Yeah.
For you get paid three Dash for like a quick little news article. But what about in late 2017 when it was $1,600 per Dash as well? And just that like, even at the worst of the crash, it's like, okay, it's down into the 50s. It's like, oh man, I only made like 8 times, over just like my savings only multiplied by 8 at its worst. And it's like, obviously this is a new ecosystem. Obviously we're going to see a lot of more stability in the future, where over time these swings won't be as wild, including in the upward direction. But it's still like this paradigm shift of, oh, I worked and my savings are worth more. I actually stored value well, and the value went up. And it doesn't even have to be radical. It's like, oh, I made $10,000 last year on this. And then, or, 10 years ago, and now you got like 12,500 at the end of that. It's like, that's good. That's what people should do. You should build your wealth over time, and not just, well, okay with that, but then adjusted for inflation and then this and that. And it just becomes a nightmare. And that's kind of really what we're all fighting for. Is we see this like crazy valuation of like all the speculative, oh, someone did an April Fool's joke and then Bitcoin is now 5 times it. Like, we see all this absolute nonsense. You see all that, but we forget that there's the underlying trend line kind of has something to do with, this is not fake.
Right. Well, this is still the really weird thing about it. Like, I remember I bought my first Bitcoins back in 2011 just to mess around with it. I had no idea that it could be, worth thousands of dollars. It didn't occur to me. And then 2013, it went up to $1,000, and I was like, what? Like this, this, what is it? 10,000, like 100x gain. That I didn't anticipate. And I thought, well, I guess this is the only time, I guess it's a once in a lifetime thing. I'm never going to see gains like that again. But then it did happen again with Dash and, other things. So I don't know, it's still hard for me to fathom, like, is this going to be the new economy? Like, people are going to make a speculative investment or bet on something and then see their savings rocket up 100x. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, there might. I mean, I still think that has to do with how new the crypto economy is. I think there will always be giant speculative swings for some coins, but at some point, something will just be. I think that there will be some less exciting, more stable things that will just. I mean, lest we forget, during the whole initial Brexit vote, Bitcoin was more stable than the British pound. So it can happen. And that was, I would believe, at the height of Bitcoin's use as a currency, or right around there, right when it's working the best. And I've still room for plenty of pumps from there, but I think that we will start to see something that's a lot more stable. But essentially, it'll be more of a I think it'll be more of a long-term savings type of thing. I mean, think about it. If you eat right and go work out for, consistently 5 days a week for a year, 2 years, you start to see some improvements. You start to look better, feel better, you get healthier. It's not at all instant, not over a week, it's not over a month, but you can build on something over time. And the reason, same thing with savings. You work hard, your value is your accumulated value that you don't spend is worth more, except when someone steals it from you, right? So, for example, if you're working out all hard, you do this, but then you have a degenerative disease, or you just terrible diet, you just ruin it. You work out hard, but then you just binge drink, and then you like swell up to a, whatever. You can see that that's stealing your gains. And so, same thing is if you're wealth, you work hard and you just don't get that savings. Someone's stealing from you. And in this case, I mean, someone's stealing the value of your currency by just making more and then devaluing it, just manipulating it. And that's, the underpinning of financial freedom is when you get to actually hold on to that. And I think people start to see that. Also, for example, fractional reserve banking, and people think, oh, put it in the savings account. I remember when people used to care about savings accounts. When it's like, oh, I get like a fraction of a percent a year. I get a little. Now people kind of realize that it's not getting them anywhere. And
I look back at some advertisements from the 80s or the 70s, and it's like, 12%, 13%. I'm like, oh,
yeah, not quite so much anymore. But it's interesting because there's plenty of lending services in cryptocurrency. They're starting to kind of add that sort of a thing. But Masternode, so a Dash Masternode, if you run a node, you get paid for running a giant part of the network's infrastructure. You get paid a certain amount of recurring income every single month. And right now, there's a few services that still have an element of trust these days, but that might change over time, that allow you to create a pooled Masternode, and just get consistent returns on your investment for as low as like one Dash. So you just throw in one Dash, you get a little bit on that. And I think that people will, as this technology starts to improve, I think more and more people are going to start to be in these sort of pooled savings type scenarios for different coins, whether it could be, loaning capital for a mining firm and then just getting part of that, whether it be a staking coin, they loan part of their stake and then they participate in that, whether it be proof of service type things like a Masternode, all those kinds of things. I think we'll start to see different savings models eventually that don't require you to trust your funds to someone else at all. I mean, right now, so this is another thing. I mean, obviously everything ties into everything I'm excited about because there's a recent upgrade that just got locked in. Dash's version 0.13 is fully locked in, which means part of that is Masternodes are now being created in a split key setup. Before it is, you just took 1,000 Dash, you send it to a wallet in one transaction, and then you just use that to start a Masternode to actually run the network, to actually vote for budget proposals in the Dash decentralized autonomous organization, and to not only start the node but also maintain the node. And so now that key is split into three. You have a collateral, you can turn it on, you just start the node up, you give the operator key to, say, your IT guy or whoever's hosting your thing, who actually runs the node itself, and he doesn't have to keep coming back to you. You don't have to go into your wallet with all your funds. You can just lock it up forever in cold storage pretty much. And then you can give the third key to voting to someone else you trust. So now you have a split key system. And as part of that, you can actually split part of your reward. So say you get a certain amount a month, you can split some of that off to another person, to pay your operator. Or if you have like a business partner who you might hold the node, the collateral, but you might just split it to 50-50 to where he gets 50% of it, you get 50% of it, and then there it goes. Or you put 50% in expenses and 50% in savings or something. Point with this split key system is, can you imagine in the future having, say, a multi-signature collateral key or voting key, to where now like a dozen people pool their money together, but no one can run away with it. No one can just run away with it, and then they all have to have a consensus on voting to where that one masternode's vote goes. And now you start to see these bigger collaborative things. So, the like the broke versus woke meme. The whole broke is you just give all your money to a bank that they may or may not ever give back, and they kind of pretend to give you a few pennies a year, but really you're just losing value. Woke, you participate in something where you don't have to fully trust anyone else. You get your money is more valuable every year, and you get more of it, and you get to actually decide how the system, the financial system that you're participating is run. You get to actually, based on your participation, vote and just say, I want to make sure we're never going to be inflated again. I want to make sure we're never going to be inflated past a certain level. I want to make sure that this is that. I want to make sure my privacy is maintained. You can actually participate in that. And that's like a total paradigm shift. It's like the power to the people to the maximum extent.
One thing about Dash is like it does make me doubtful sometimes, because they've been talking about evolution for such a long time, but the progress seems kind of slow. Do you have any comments about that?
Yes, that's been the eternal thing. And that's actually what got me excited about Dash. What got me using Dash was the necessity of, I need to live off of something. But what got me excited about it was I was running a sort of experimental nonprofit activism group running entirely off of Bitcoin donations. And that worked for a while. And I ran into a couple pain points of, first off, it's just difficult to get random donations because there's friction there. You can't just put a QR code next to stuff and expect people to like go like donate for what you do. And it's hard to get recurring donations because you have to like sign up with a Coinbase thing or something. Was no protocol level thing. And I heard that Dash Evolution was promising usernames. So, hey, you can just like see a guitarist, play on the street, and he just says, at the crazy guitarist, and you can just send to that address, to send to that username. You don't have to be like, oh, let me go scan this big old ugly code. Oh, this is off. A pigeon took a crap on this part of the code. I can't scan it. Like, you don't have to deal with all that kind of thing. And then also about recurring payments at a protocol level. So anyway, first off, if this was so easy, everyone would be doing it. So far, as I keep on here. There might be some other projects on the fringes that have figured out something else out like this, but none of the big Bitcoin-based chains have anything sort of a fully decentralized username and contact list type setup. And from listening and talking to developers over the years about this, including helping the core team find some of the talent they were looking for, to be able to create a system like this, there's a lot of backend infrastructure out there to make it like truly decentralized. And so essentially I'm very confident because first off, 2/3 of the evolution debut are already out. Version 0.13 includes some things like special transactions, which are not like right now. Bitcoin Cash, other things have these things called opcodes, which are sort of an. And I'm not trying to
smart contract system.
Yes, I'm not trying to say something negative. They're sort of like an ugly hack for a lot of these data-based transaction usages. And so there's special transactions with Dash, which are able to do things like, for example, sign up a username or record a friending, so a liaison on the blockchain, things like that. That's already out. Version 0.14 just came out on testnet, which is huge because first off, anti-51% attack. Chain locks would basically protect Dash against a 51% mining attack by basically requiring to have like over half of the masternodes as well, which is just super untenable. But as part of that as well is something called LLM queues, which is long-living masternode quorums, where right now, when you have a masternode quorum, is you take, of all the, say, 4,000 masternodes out there, you take like a random sampling of them, and then they perform a specific action, and then something else, another random sampling does it, et cetera, et cetera. Long-living quorum would be, you pick one quorum and it would last for say a day and like do repeated tasks. And that's going to be that's an important pillar for a whole lot of these different elements that you need for the final evolution platform. But I mean, they've already, a lot of these repositories are already becoming open sourced and available to look at. So the evolution code's already starting to be out there for the public to look at. And there's, I know, Dash Drive, which is the IPFS based storage system for a lot of these kinds of data contracts. The data blocks, state transitions, all this kind of stuff is starting to come out to where it basically, it's like you see it. It's not like, oh yeah, we're working on something. You're seeing that it's basically out. They've already done a lot on DevNets to basically test the sending and receiving functions to and from usernames and contact lists. Basically, yeah, it's taken a long time because it's a once in a lifetime kind of a innovation, but it's not like, oh, it's taken a while with nothing to show for it. There's a lot to show for it.
Yeah, so they're getting deep with the back-end stuff, and they do actually have a grand vision. Like they want something that looks like PayPal or Venmo, something user-friendly, where you can just log in and then it has a discounts area. You go to a merchant and get a discount for buying with Dash, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm always paying attention to the rest of the space. I recently interviewed Alex Agut, the CEO of Handcash, which is that formerly Bitcoin Cash, now Bitcoin SV based wallet, which just lets you send to handles. Like it's a $sign and then a name. You can send and receive. Every time you send to that, it generates a new public key backend, and it does that. And it's super user friendly wallet. It works really well. Obviously, with your own wallet and your own private keys, you control your own funds. However, it's still like the service itself controls the sort of liaison between usernames, and it's only basically not every service can use it. Now, with Evolution, the username password setup can be implemented into all kinds of different wallets and services on a completely decentralized level. And so imagine your Evolution username becomes kind of like a form of identity. Like almost, like right now you have, say, AML KYC type stuff with government issued documents. But then what happens if you have this username based thing and you can just log into your social media platform with your Evolution, your completely decentralized Evolution username, and being able to send end-to-end encrypted messages on the Evolution platform. So you don't have to say, hey, how much was that? Did I promise to pay you for this? You can actually say that, like, you don't have to like go to a separate communication channel to do that. That's through the same one used to send the actual money. Now imagine building a social media platform on the Dash Evolution blockchain, all stored, completely decentralized, all you just working very smoothly, all with your own same usernames that you use for your same identities or whatever that you use for your financial transactions, with built-in chat and built-in payments. So sort of like the way, if you imagine the way like Facebook is doing right now, like in a completely centralized manner, the way you have your identity, a lot of people log in with their Facebook ID or whatever to other services, but you have your entire system there, your entire social media system, and then a built-in messenger with that thing. And then people sometimes send and receive money through the actual Facebook Messenger thing. Imagine all that except completely decentralized and stored on the blockchain. I mean, that will be usable very soon. And there's like a lot of smart contract hype around the space. And what Dash is aiming to do is something called, and me is not a highly technical person, I could just say what I know, right? There's always a lot that I don't fully understand. But instead of running smart contracts like Ethereum, Dash data contracts first, computations would not be done on the chain, which is one of the reasons why Ethereum's hit these scaling issues, is because every time they're running their computations, it's all going on the chain, and it becomes very clunky and expensive to sort of do that thing. Whereas with Dash, you do it locally, and then you'd store the result of that, the actual data result of that, on the IPFS-based Dash drive with a hash of that on the Dash blockchain. And so and you wouldn't have to learn Solidity or some special programming language. You could program dApps, decentralized applications, in your own, JavaScript or whatever else you're used to, and just sort of store the results on the chain.
Mm-hmm.
And so it seems like I'm very excited for the dApp revolution, because the chief architect of Dash, Andy Freer, who's been with the project since almost the very beginning, a couple months ago, he left the core team so he could focus on building all these dApps on his own on the Dash blockchain. And that's going to be, if like he's the guy who designed a lot of Dash's architecture, and he's seeing this is going to be so huge, I don't even want to, like, my work is done designing the main system. I'm going to work on all the other cool bells and whistles you can plug into the system after it's out. That seems like a very strong signal to me.
Yes. So what you mentioned about Facebook, I think one reason that's so important to move towards more decentralized social media, with Facebook, they're always trying to, like you said, you sign into other sites with your Facebook ID, or you go on there and they're like, so attach your phone's SMS to it, and then what happens if you get banned from Facebook? So they have all this power over your communications. Like the other day, my friend was banned on Facebook because he posted some nasty meme, and I was sending
the best way of doing it.
The best way to ban someone, or what do you mean?
The best way of getting banned is you go down a blaze of memeful glory.
Yeah, with Zuckerberg doing some hand salute, or some Nazi salute.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm sending him messages, and I could see that he's reading the messages, like it's coming up seen. But the only way he could respond was like put it an emoticon or an emoji onto what I was saying, so he could give a thumbs up, or a sad face or something. So I'm like, sad. What is going on? Are you sick? Are you disabled? Like, were you in some kind of accident?
Please help. Terrorist kind of situation. Oh, they're gonna take my memes.
Yeah.
Yes, it's absolutely. I think everything is going to start to become much more decentralized. And of course, what Bitcoin originally set out to do was to sort of strike the root of the problem of your number one thing that you care about in life is your physical integrity, your physical safety. Is someone going to smash your head in, whatever? After that, you care about your resources. Do I have money? Do I have food and water and shelter and transportation, like all those? And money is the root of all that. So money is second in importance only to your own physical integrity, your own physical safety. So strike the root right to the beginning of, here you go. Now, if your money can be free, people don't really have that much power over you. Then you start to branch out from money to other things. Like, for example, your communications platforms. That's another huge thing, because if they censor your physical person, you could get in prison. That's terrible. If they take your money, that's the second most terrible thing, probably. And then the third thing, if they just stop you from talking, they stop you from expressing yourself in your own way. So now we start to have decentralized platforms that function with that, hopefully tied in with the actual decentralized money as well, because like we've learned with some platforms such as Gab, you can be as free speechy as you want, but then if they just get you at the purse strings, you're done in, right? You're done for.
What happened with Gab?
I believe that they had some payment processor issues where people were denying them banking services, and they've since reportedly switched to using Bitcoin instead.
Okay, so it's similar with WikiLeaks.
Yes, the exact same sort of a thing. So once you have that worry of, you start tying the free speech platform with the free finance platform, and you start building out from there about, like, what other things do I do in my life that I rely on a centralized service to sort of run. And the sky's the limit. And part of that is I think it's very important to have something that's actually usable, because there's so many services out there, so many things that we rely on that we use because it just sort of works. It's just that easy. And people say, oh, I don't know how to use this. And like, think about it. Cryptocurrency has been around for over a decade now, and you can't really use it anywhere except for, small pockets of, like where I'm at in New Hampshire, or small pockets of the internet where certain workarounds. You can't just go, like, what happened? It wasn't this supposed to be amazing? How come no one's using it? A lot of it is because, well, it's difficult to implement, and it's very rough around the edges, and so it's still there. We have the freedom technology. And then, do you remember in the early days of encryption? Do you remember trying to do encrypted chats or things like that, and it just being kind of difficult?
Yeah,
Now,
I remember messing around with PGP and just shaking my head going, what is this?
yeah, how will anyone use this? Well, I mean, now you have Signal. You can attach Signal to your download the Signal app. Wire is another great one. Keybase is fantastic. I'm always been a big fan of Keybase because you can cryptographically verify all your social media accounts as not compromised, and then message through that system as well. But now it's like easy. You just get like an app, and then you just encrypted whatever, and then encryption established. Boom, you just start sending messages. Oh, it'll delete after 7 days and be gone forever if you want. All right, and then now it's just, you don't have to make a sacrifice to sort of live in a free way. And that's the ultimate thing. Is if someone's trying to sell you crypto that's overcomplicated, that makes your life more complicated than it should be, it's either a research project, which is fine. We all need to figure the technology out ahead of time, or they're trying to sell you snake oil, because if this is not going to be usable, no one's going to use it, and therefore it's useless. So it doesn't matter how decentralized and awesome something is, if no one's going to use it for whatever reason, whether it be high fees, slow transaction times, difficult usability, steep learning curve, whatever it is, just incompatibility with other things, people just aren't going to use it. And then all this amazing world-changing innovation is just for naught. It's just for nothing. And so that's one of the reasons why I really gravitated towards Dash from the beginning, because not because, oh, evolution's fantastic. No, didn't exist yet, and it is still like mostly not existing. But it's just because that's in your mind from the very beginning is, oh, we got to make sure people are actually use this someday. We're not just going to build it and then we're going to write all these kinds of books about understanding Bitcoin and mastering Bitcoin and Bitcoin standard and all these other things about, like, so people can study this like esoteric thing. It's like, no, just send and receive, use every day, use to the point to where you don't even know you're using crypto anymore.
Well, I hope it gets to that level. I mean, it's actually, it's been a while. It's probably been more than a year since I've actually sent someone crypto to pay for a service. For a while, I used it on Fiverr a lot. When Fiverr had Bitcoin, I was like, sweet, living in the future. But then they stopped accepting it. I think it was too technically difficult for them.
Yes, it could have been too high fees, could have been anything, really.
Yeah. It was cool when the transaction went through, but if something went wrong, I would talk to their tech support and they're like, oh, yes, Bitcoin is a decentralized payment transfer system. I'm like, yeah, I know. How do we get this to go through? Anyway.
Yeah, that's a great way of avoiding responsibility.
Yes, they didn't know what was going on. Anyway, with the Signal thing, with Australia a few months ago, they introduced this law, which is a bit scary, because what they said is all of these encrypted chat programs, they have to respond to us, and they have to give us a backdoor, or they have to show us their data. If they don't show us their data, then we're going to issue this writ and tell them, put in a backdoor. But the funny thing was, the guys who work on Signal were like, well, that's impossible. It's an open source system. So if you wanted, you can tell us to put in a backdoor, we'll put in a backdoor, but people will just go ahead and use the version without the backdoor.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's a very strange system that people kind of think of. There's this one of Dash's best innovations that almost no one really knows about, and those who do know about it, a lot of people just think it's something terrible. It's something called a Spork, which is a multi-phased fork. And basically what it is a way, when you're doing a hard fork upgrade, it's a way of turning on or off specific features to assist with a transfer. So for example, say you deterministic masternodes, or what are the new form of masternode is called, where now you have the split key setup. Because before, when anyone wanted to find a list of all the masternodes out there, when anyone wanted to query the masternodes, they had to go look at the blockchain and find all like the 1,000 dash units that are associated with the masternode. Again, I'm kind of glossing over some stuff, but basically you had to have access to the whole blockchain because that was the only list. Remember the one key for collateral, for voting, for everything. So you have to go find that. Now, because you have a split key setup and masters are configured a different way, there's a list out there that doesn't make you need to know the whole blockchain. There's just a very simple list, which means now you can do a whole bunch of advanced stuff on just simple light wallet SPV clients. Like your normal mobile wallet will now be able to, I don't know if anyone's implemented it yet, but be able to use advanced privacy features trustlessly, which no other coin can do right now, as far as I know, unless something happened while I was asleep. But anyway, part of what this does is you basically have to completely reconfigure a masternode. And that could cause a lot of disruption to the network. So basically, there was a time window between when people could upgrade their masternodes, and then at some point, all the old masternodes would just get booted from the system as a way of, instead of just you upgrade and then you have all this incompatibility of chain splits, it's just a nightmare, all the dangers of hard forks or whatever. And so there's this one little system that can just, you can flip a switch and then everything just sort of locks into place once everything is ready. So you do that multi-phase fork. And a lot of people are just screaming like, oh, look, the devs can just shut everything down at the flip of a hat and all this kind of stuff about, centralization, whatever. I mean, first off, most of these things are just minor switches to just assist in an upgrade. There's no real way you could do that. But as the CEO of the core team was mentioned, I think he was on a Box Mining interview a long time ago. When asked about that, he just said, well, look, you know how easy it is to just take the exact same code and just write the Spork out of it, right? It just default on, rather than, well, it can be switched on and off. It's just so easy to just run the version without this if you don't like it. It's just so easy for everyone to just be like, yeah, no, we're just going to run the exact same code without the ability to make an easier upgrade. And it's the same thing like with Signal or some open source kind of thing, some other open source project like that, where it doesn't matter if you just try to sneak something in there because people just do their own version. It just works that way. Like people will just do whatever they want to do, and there's just not that much risk to that. And so that's a radical thing that people don't understand is, oh, we'll just do it our way. Like that didn't happen in the past. You don't just buy a vehicle off the lot and then they say, well, we have this certain emissions testing. I'll just take it out and throw it away. Like, no, you don't do that. Just not how you do it. You kind of have to take what they give you. And now you could just take this and be like, I don't like that. I'm going to change it. Or you could just say, you look through it, and if you approve of everything in there, you run it. If you don't, you don't. And then more importantly, if people have a split of opinion on these, like, well, I like this version, no, I like this version, and they don't want to get along, they can just run two different versions. Now it just goes into two different camps. I mean, or three, or 12. We're talking about Bitcoin. I don't know how many Bitcoin splits there have been, but there's at least Bitcoin Cash SV, Gold, and Diamond.
Yeah,
there might be a couple more.
I think there's at least 10.
Yeah, and a lot of those are probably scams to make a quick buck. But as far as like the main three, they had a different vision of Bitcoin, so they just started Bitcoining over there, and these guys are Bitcoining over here, and it's all fine. Like you can't say you can't do that. Nope, you can.
Yeah, yeah. But that's kind of the thing that I liked about Dash was that that seemed a lot less likely because if you have the voting system, and so if people wanted to go in a different direction, then they don't just have to fork and make their own project, but they can try to raise support within the community. So that's
Yes, and that's one thing that's I've been very obviously paying close attention to, but very excited about is the progress that Dash is making in that direction. I mean, first off, the legend is, I mean, it's not legend, it's fact. In January 2016, the block size debate started going really hot with Bitcoin. And so Dash had its own little mini debate. Should we do a big block version? Should we do on-chain scaling, or should we try to do something else? And then Evan Duffield, Dash's founder, put it to a vote. As anyone can, submit 5 Dash as an anti-spam fee, and you put a proposal to the whole network. It just said, should Dash increase the block size when the time had come? And overwhelmingly, it was yes. And there you go. No one ever argued after that because everyone polled the network, the money in the network, right? As in the Dash itself. And it just said this is the way it is. And just that one simple little bit is so good at squashing all kinds of arguments about who's right or who isn't. There were a few times when there were some disagreements. I remember a group of people in late 2016 left the Dash community, and then they joined up with a few other projects, most notably Pivx at first, and then a bunch of them went off to Smart Cash after that, and then who knows what they're doing now. So it's not like it's not like there's just no conflict, but there's never any question of which way Dash goes because Dash decides. And most recently, there's been something that's very interesting. I don't know how much of this you've heard, and it's more like in the weeds kind of stuff, but this time from a legal perspective. So right now, if you have a development team, like say the Bitcoin core team, someone holds the keys to the repository, someone holds access and can give or revoke access to the GitHub repository. People develop, and then that's just the Bitcoin core code, and everyone kind of runs that, or sometimes they don't, or whatever. Same thing with the Dash core team, except, obviously the Dash core team is self-funded through the decentralized autonomous organization. 10% of all the Dash created is available every month to proposals such as funding development. But it's still and so the big thing is, oh, well, Dash is more decentralized than something like Bitcoin because you can just vote them out. You can just cut off the money. It's and I mean, I agree with that statement, except the limitation to that is, okay, well, in super bad duress situations, you just take the money away from a bad development team and give it to a new one. And then the network officially votes that they're the official ones, and they're actually getting money. The old team still can kind of cause some problems. They can still say, well, we have all the repositories, we're not going to do it. And then you have to clone them and create your own, start building off of that. And it's a big headache. Then there's well, they might have the dash.org website and domain. It's oh gosh, well, we're going to do dashcrypto.org or whatever. We're going to do something different. There's still some disruptions. So the Dash core team Dash core group is a US-based legal entity. And what Dash did is it formed something called the Dash DAO Irrevocable Trust based out of New Zealand, which is a legal trust that legally owns the Dash core team. And in order to affect ownership or whatever, a Masternode vote can basically cause the trustee of the trust to remove members of the Dash core team leadership and instruct them, actually legally compel them to do things that the Masternode network votes for. So now, if the Masternodes say, you suck, we don't like you, we're taking all you guys out of there, we're funding a new team. Oh, by the way, turn over the keys to the access to GitHub, turn over the website, and then they say no. It's oh yeah, well, the lawyers are coming there. You're going to be legally compelled to do this thing that the network cryptographically compelled you to do. Now it's all solid. And so recently there was an election for trust protectors for the legal trust, where this is, again, way too far in the legal weeds and the business structure, et cetera, that for me to completely understand. However, basically there was a few people from the Dash community who were elected by the masternodes to act as their representatives in the legal world, as in then the trust protectors elect the trustee, and the trustee actually does the actions of controlling the property. So but now what you have is you have the Dash decentralized autonomous organization that anyone can buy some Dash and just spin up a masternode or join with other people and spin up a masternode and just affect how it's governed with no one stopping you. Anyone in the world, even a troll, a hater, can do that. You can just plug in and just go to, and there are a couple, unfortunately, but anyone can do that. And now there's a legal way that the Dash decentralized autonomous organization that anyone in the world can just plug into can now own legal property, can actually own things and control them in the legal world as well as like a reflection to it. And yet still the masternodes can remain completely anonymous and not be like identified or legally registered. It's a very, no one's really doing this kind of thing. Everyone's just like, oh, it's decentralized. Or then we have our foundation and our legal trust and all that. So it's basically, we run a decentralized protocol, but a centralized organization kind of runs the whole thing anyway. So it's, now this is something completely decentralized that just has a legal world, an old world shadow, as it were, a kind of representation in the real world in like the fusion of the old and the new systems. And it's, I don't know, I'm kind of blown away by it. It's pretty exciting to me.
Yes, it's very interesting to see how people can make new structures and combine them with the old. And yeah, I think there's probably a lot of catching up for legal systems to do. It's probably going to be a long time before they fully wrap around it.
Yeah, in fact, there's another system that's being developed, another legal entity called Dash Ventures, which would allow the Dash network to own stake in companies, et cetera, for like a for-profit kind of a thing. And of course, because the masternodes are anonymous, they can't receive equity or dividends directly. But the network could still own things and do various things, and that's still more in the process of being created. But the legal structure for that is something that only has been around. It was first attempted, I think, in 2017. So this is like the cutting edge of law as well as the cutting edge of cryptocurrency and decentralized systems. So people way smarter than me are working on all this kind of stuff. I'm just trying my best to keep up with this whole thing. And that's just Dash.
Yes.
There's so much else out there.
Yeah, that's right. So one last question for you. There are a lot of rumors about what central bankers think and what commercial bankers think. And some people say that maybe they're still kind of ignoring it. Or I know a few people who work in commercial banks, and it's like it's not even on their radar. And other people are reporting these rumors saying that certain bankers have brown stains in their pants thinking about what crypto might mean. And what kind of things do you think are going on in those boardrooms?
Yeah, it depends on at what level. I think that all the smartest ones realize that this is the system of the future, that they can keep it down for a while, and they should probably try to keep it down for a while, but at some point they'll have to join with it and get stake in it. And I think that that's really at the higher level. At the low level, you would probably think people are ignoring it, and yeah, they're going to be the first to lose their jobs. At the mid level, people are freaking out. They should freak out, but wait for their bosses to tell them, no, now we're going to be running a big part of this. Like, for example, what happens if you have a bank that now gets into the business of crypto lending to where, like, a few of the big exchanges, like say Poloniex, used to lend. You could leave your balance there and lend for people trying to gamble on it, let's be honest. And so you could be in the crypto lending business, and of course you'd have to probably be a lot more efficient than the current fiat lending system. But yeah, you could still get involved with that. You could still there's still a lot of roles for banks. It's just that the issuing of the currency is not going to be in, like, central banking is not going to be here for that much longer, I don't think. And they'll probably stick around for another few decades, but probably won't be prominent anymore. They will have to cede that power. And what that means is they will probably have to um, buy a stake in the new systems, i.e., they will start buying large investments in the top cryptocurrencies so that they still have some of that, even though they don't actually get to control the supply itself. They get to hold on to a little bit of it. And I'm guessing, I mean, for the longest time, banks as well as other systems have dealt with payments, like the payments industry. And a lot of that is going to go away. But there's still going to be people trying to create advanced systems for transfer, like accounting systems, things like that. Some people might, and don't forget, there's a lot of infrastructure that people can invest in. So, for example, it would be easy to see, there's a company called Neptune Dash, which is based out of Canada, and their primary business model is running Dash masternodes. And so, I mean, publicly traded company and everything. And so you can buy stock in Dash masternodes, basically. And so there's going to be a lot of companies like this, or a lot of banks will just, all right, well, we don't run the payment systems anymore, so we're just going to run part of the payment system. We're going to spin up a few mining farms, or incentivized nodes like masternodes, things like that, and just they'll have part of that. It'll be completely decentralized infrastructure. If they start being bad actors, then they just get cut out of the whole system. Other people can still act. They'll I think that, to sort of summarize all that in one sentence, I think the old systems, the central banks, etc., will just find a way to participate in the new system. And I think their percentage of the global power over money is going to go significantly down. But I think that they'll still be around and still do okay.
Yeah. So very similar to what we see with newspapers now. So there's some newspapers are kind of struggling a bit for power, but there's still a market for that kind of thing. And
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. All right. Thanks for your time, Joel.
Yeah, no problem. I hope you got all the insight you needed.